Hello and welcome to my video on robot vocals.
Hello and welcome to Catalyze Music Academy. My name is Zaak Kerstetter and I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer. And today for our quick tip, I want to talk about one of the least understood audio effects in live, which is the vocoder, and specifically how to use it to make robotic sounding vocals, which has been something that has been popular in a lot of electronic music since the late 70s and early 80s. And it's a really fun, cool technique to take your vocals and make them just sound a little more interesting and a little more weird and futuristic and sci-fi, and sounds really cool. Before we dive too deep into it, I do just want to let you know, if you are enjoying the content on the channel, please feel free to subscribe. I release videos every Monday and Thursday about different topics related to Ableton Live. On top of that, I am streaming here on YouTube on Tuesdays and Fridays as well. So feel free to check those out. So diving right into it, right now we have the vocoder, and I have an audio track here that I will be sending my vocals to. And when you first load up the vocoder, it sounds a little crazy. It sounds very demonic. Like if I send my vocal here, it's going to sound like a demon. There's a very kind of demonic sound to it, which is not usually super pleasant, and that's not usually what you want. So you need to understand the basics of how a vocoder works. We're basically combining two different audio signals called the carrier and the modulator, and we're putting them together to create one sound. In this case, our modulator is our vocals, so it's the vocal signal coming through, and our carrier can be any one of these four different options. And it defaults to being a noise oscillator. So it's combining my voice with a noise oscillator, which sounds like this. Again, not super pleasant unless you're into that kind of thing, which in that case, go for it. However, we can change to up to four different options here, including things like pitch tracking. So pitch tracking is basically like an internal synthesizer. It doesn't sound super great, but it'll get us closer to what we want to do. So this is what the pitch tracking sounds like by default. Hello, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sounds kind of robotic, but it's not super pleasant. We can play around with the pitch controls here. We can like change the waveform here a little bit, and we can change the low and high frequencies. This will make it sound better, or at least a little bit more clear if we adjust the range a little bit more. Hello, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, not the greatest, but it can work. However, if you want to like really use this in the kind of traditional robot vocal vocoding style, what we want to do is we want to grab from an external source. So this external source can be any other track in your session. So we can grab audio from, and I'm going to grab it from a wavetable. Over here, I've got a wavetable track with just a saw wave, really nothing going on here. Sounds like that. And I'm going to be sending that signal into the vocoder and then combining the synthesizer with the vocals to get this nice robotic sound. However, a couple of things we need to know. First off, if I record and enable this track and send my vocal here, we're going to see that we're going to be sending a signal here, but you can't hear anything. And that's because I'm not sending anything from the wavetable. So you need to have an active live signal coming from both sources in order for this to actually make a difference. On top of that, because we're grabbing post effects and not post mixer from the wavetable, I can mute this track. So I can be sending a signal in, and I don't need to hear the synthesizer. I can only hear the synthesizer as it's coming through the vocoder. So right now, if I send a signal here, it's muted, so we're not hearing it. So if I record and enable here, I can send a signal, and then I also record and enable here. If you're hitting the control key, you can record and enable multiple tracks simultaneously. So now if I play a note, we're going to be able to hear both the synthesizer and the vocal combined as one, and that's how we get our robot vocals. A couple of things that are important here. Number one, the pitch that I play is going to be very important in determining what the robot vocals sound like. So if I play a lower note will sound like this. If I play a higher note sounds like this. So you can pitch it up and down. That also means if you're playing like a melody or a bass line and you send it into a vocoder, you can pitch it so it'll stay in key with your song. On top of that, the waveform that you're using also makes a big difference. So if we switch this over to like a square wave, this will sound different. So this is what it sounds like with the square wave. So that's the square wave sound, or a low frequency square wave. Low frequency square wave sounds like this. So it very much depends on the audio coming through, and you can change that to tweak it and make it sound different. There are a couple other really cool features here that will make a big difference. Number one, if I play a chord, for example, this is what it sounds like when I play a chord. So chords also sound different than just a single note at a time, which sounds really cool. And we also have this EQ arrangement that's like multi-band EQ, where you can like EQ out different frequencies if you want. We can also change the number of bands here from 4 bands to 40 bands. And the higher bands, essentially the higher resolution you're getting, this is going to make it sound much clearer and easier to understand. So here I am playing a chord, and I get different sounds depending on the bands. So you can play around with that, as well as tweak a few settings here, like the bandwidth of each of these bands, the low and high frequency. You can tweak it a little bit and have fun with it. But I tend to find if you're going for these like more clearer sounding vocals, higher bands tend to sound better. If I go down to like lower bands, this is what it sounds like at lower bands. The lower bands is not quite as clear as higher bands. The other really important control here that's worth noting is this formant control. This will essentially pitch your sound up and down. Anytime you see the word formant, think vowel sounds, A, E, I, O, and U. So as I turn this up, it's going to pitch me higher, but also get me different vowel-y sounds. And as I go down, it's going to pitch me lower. So here is normal. If I pitch this up, it sounds like this. And if I go the other way, this is what it sounds like, pitch down. And if I go way up, you get some crazy sounds. They get crazy sounds as you kind of pitch it up and down, but subtle amounts there can like do lots of interesting, weird vocally things. Lastly, I do want to mention over here, there is an extra like unvoiced oscillator. This is a noise oscillator. And if you start turning this up, this just a little bit will help smooth out some of those vocoded vocal sounds, but too much of it will sound kind of noisy. So I'm gonna try turning this up. I'm gonna turn this up. This is what it sounds like with a little bit of noise. And you can hear it adds like a little bit of that noise in there. And too much, it just sounds too noisy. So watch out for that. But sometimes this can help kind of smooth it out if it sounds a little choppy. And that's basically it. We also have a dry wet control as well as some envelope controls. There's a lot more that the vocoder can do. However, these are some of like the basic controls that if you're just going for a robot vocal kind of sound, can do a lot of good and really help out. You can also hit this enhance control. This also tends to help make it sound quite a bit better. This is what it sounds like with the enhance. And here's the same chord without the enhance. Here's the same chord without the enhance. In that case, fairly similar, but in certain situations, this can make a big difference in the quality of your sound. So there's the quick and easy version of the vocoder. Like I said, there's a lot more that this can do. There's some like really cool, crazy, experimental, weird stuff you can get into if you want to dive into the vocoder. But this technique, if you're just going purely for just some interesting robot vocal sounds, works really, really well. You just take an audio signal coming in on the track with the vocoder, and then you send a signal from a synthesizer. You play whatever notes or chords you want from whatever synthesizer you want, combines the two together, and you get these nice robot vocals. So that's pretty much it. I will probably do another vocoder video later on, dive into some of the other like weirder things you can do with it, but that should give you a good idea of the basics of how the vocoder works and how you can start using it in your tracks to get these nice synthetic robot vocal sounds. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you again soon.